Hello, welcome. I am
Hi.
Karin and I am here with Paul Gitsham, thriller and crime author. He is the author of the DCI Warren Jones series, which contains 9 novels, or 9 novels, correct? And a few short stories.
Yep,
He
no
has a PhD
novels.
in molecular biology. Oh, 10 novels. He has a PhD in molecular biology and is a former secondary school biology teacher. He also worked previously at a major high street bank where he ensured that international terrorists hadn't opened a child's savings account. His newest novel, The Aftermath, is his first standalone domestic suspense thriller. Thank you for being here with us today, Paul.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Great to meet you finally.
Yes, finally, we have been trying to get this. Yes, exactly. We've been trying to meet each other for a while now and have this interview. So I'm so glad. A little bit about your new novel, The Aftermath, because this is quite different for you.
It is very different. It is very different. So basically, this is my first domestic thriller. It's a standalone. So rather than my police procedurals, which are all behind me, my Warren Jones books, this one is standalone, and it is told from the view of the victims rather more than the police. And essentially, what happens is it opens straight into action as these things do. A man comes home. He's been away on a business trip. His garden shed's on fire, and then he realizes that he can't find his wife anywhere, and it's obvious where she must be. And that's how we open. And then what we see as the book unfolds is we basically see the fallout from that. So there's questions about whether it really was a suicide or whether there was something more nefarious. We see the run up to that. So it was very important to me that the victim, she was to know her as and see what led her to this place. And then much of the story is actually told in what is now the present tense, 3 years later. And that is basically he is trying to move on. He's got a new fiance. They're expecting twins, but the past will not leave him behind.
That aspect of the story. I loved how we got to go to the past, get these tidbits of what was happening back then in the protagonist's life and his relationship with his wife, and then what is going on in present day. It was so suspenseful. I like to think that as a thriller author myself, that I'm really good at guessing what is going to happen. And I have to say, you really had me here. There's a couple twists in your book, and I was just so pleasantly surprised to see that I had it wrong. Very close to the end, I have to say. I was like, wait a second. So you did a really great job with that. I've read a few books as well.
But
I have to say, I think the Aftermath was just really pacey
yeah,
compared to your police procedurals.
yeah, this is it. I mean, one of the things about the police procedurals, particularly because it's an ongoing series, is that there is obviously some backstory that needs to be told. How do we get to this position? And then I've always prided myself on having very accurate police procedures. So you've got to make that balance, obviously, between drama and accuracy. Which I like to think I've got pretty much right, but by definition, that
Very
tends to
good
make
at
the
that.
book a little slower. I think
Yeah.
it's
No,
amazing what
you're
you find
very good at
on the
accuracy.
internet, Wikipedia.
That's true. No, I have to say, actually, if I'm when I was writing my first 2 novels, which were also police procedurals in nature, uh,
Mm, very good.
I was not accurate enough, and my editor was always, like, getting on me about that, and your books were kind of some of my go-tos for, "Okay, wait a second. How did Paul pull that off in his novel?" Because you were kind of like I feel like you have to be up there as, like, one of the guidelines for how to do this accurately, which is incredible because you don't have a law enforcement background per se, do you?
Oh. No, no, I don't. No. I mean, it's funny. People do worry about that. They say, how do you get police procedure and stuff? Well, first of all, you'd be amazed at what is out there on the internet. Very early in my
Yeah.
career, I was just Googling away and seeing what I came. And I came across basically what is essentially a magazine by the police on murder investigation, full of case
Oh,
studies and all
wow.
sorts. And thought, this is brilliant. This. So I downloaded it was a PDF. I downloaded it, and I noticed that it was like the URL was set up just like it would be in an academic library with the volume number and the date it was published and that. So I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens if I change the volume number in the URL. And I did. And I got another edition. I was like, brilliant. So I hoovered up loads of these things. And then I thought, I wonder what else is available on this server. So I went back to the parent URL, clicked it, at which point it asked me for my warrant number and which police force I worked for. And it was like, oh, okay. Now, as it happens, everything was anonymized. I mean, there was. I read something, and it's like there's nothing there that it was secrets. It is all out there. You can go to major bookstores like Waterstones, which is our equivalent of Barnes and Noble, and you can buy the I can't remember the name of it now. There's actually a police handbook, and it's the one that beginning police officers are told to go and buy, and they just go to Waterstones and buy it, and they don't ask if you're a police officer because it is publicly available. So there was nothing in there that I shouldn't be reading, but it was really helpful. And I really enjoyed it reading that, and then Wikipedia,
because you really have the whole
worked on that.
investigation process down.
A lot of it comes from practice. A lot of it is common sense as well. Common sense. You think, well, you got, if you watch. So I watch quite a few documentaries, and with apologies to our American viewers, I tend to steer clear of the American ones, partly because they're first of all, the procedure is very different.
Yeah.
With 20,000 plus law enforcement agencies across the states, they don't have a common approach. Whereas in the UK, it's 43 police forces across the mainland UK, and that basically they follow pretty much the same rules. England and Wales have the same rules. Scotland does have its own legal system, as does Northern Ireland, but actually they're still very similar. There's not much difference, and the actual procedures that they use are very standardized, and they all use one big computer system, which again is not the case in the US. We don't have the jurisdictional issues.
No.
Also, some of these, well, you get to know very quickly. If it's 30 minutes long and claims to cover 2 murder cases, it's not very good. It's going to be somebody shouting at the screen about how exciting and terrible this murder was. There'll be the same talking heads who are shouting, usually the same thing they shouted last week with a different name.
Yeah.
So I tend to avoid those. But we're fortunate in the UK. We have some very good fly-on-the-wall ones, like 24 Hours in Police Custody. And they show the whole process, including cameras in the interviews, so you actually see the procedure, and so they're good.
I mean, I think that's
and from then on, it's
really good
sense.
point to. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good point to bring up, especially if there's any aspiring authors out there in the audience, because I will never forget the day that I turned a very specific police procedural scene in it, and my editor was like, "You can't write it like this because readers in the UK won't accept it. You can't be fast and loose with the rules unless you're writing, an American police story, or the cops are not supposed to be the good guys in your story." So I had to do a lot of rewriting on my novel to make sure that it would be acceptable to readers in the UK.
Yeah,
but you've done fantastic.
I mean, some people see that as daunting. I actually like it. I like it being in a box with four sides, and I've got to stay within that box. The rules are very clear. And the rules are well known as well. I mean, British fans of police procedure will spot artistic license a mile off. And I actually, funny enough, I'm one of these writers who hates a blank piece of paper, scared of it. You give me a blank piece of paper, say, go on, write us something. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to write. But if you put some rules on there, like, you got to write me a piece, you got 5 minutes, you got to reuse these 3 words. Bang, my pen doesn't stop moving. Similarly, when it comes to the police procedure, I like having the box. These things have to happen within the rules, and in fact, whereas some see them as constraining, I actually see them as catalysts for creativity. For example, Warren Jones is a UK police officer. This means that he cannot solve a problem by running in with his gun drawn because he doesn't have a gun, and he'll never have a gun, and
Right.
he'll never handle a gun. Detectives in this country are not firearm trained. It's as simple as that. We have specialist firearm officers, and those constraints are actually, I find as a writer, I really like. And it is an element, it isn't a case of everything goes. You have to be very strict to what you're doing. I mean, obviously, if you're going to have a rogue cop, that's a different matter. And maybe you might have a specialist unit that doesn't technically exist in the UK, and you can do that as well. And I've experimented with that, perhaps in some later books. But the idea is that you follow the rules.
So you've spent years with Warren Jones, and
10
you've
years.
gotten very comfortable in the police procedural.
Yeah.
And now you've written a domestic thriller. So how did you decide thriller? Why not another police procedural?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, and I want to ask you about your motivation as well, because of course your two latest books are standalones, Sweet Little Lies, and of course The Man in Room 7, both standalones. And yeah, I think, see, I've got like a lot of writers. I have a list of ideas, and I'm always adding to them. And there can be short ideas which might just be a little twist or an idea. Oh, could that happen? Others might actually be 3 or 4 lines and potentially the bare bones of a future plot. And some of those just could not be shoehorned into a DCI Warren Jones. It's as simple as that. I mean, the structure wasn't there. They don't. For example, the aftermath running on the different timelines. That I can do that. I mean, I have had the third book, Silent as the Grave, does visit Warren's childhood because there are some echoes through to the future, but actually, it's not dual timeline narrative. And so when I was casting them out for some ideas, I really, really wanted to write some of these ideas. They were calling to me, you want to write this book. So I thought, well, bite the bullet, do it as a standalone. And the first draft, which I wrote really quickly, I gave myself a deadline of basically getting it done 6 weeks before I got married. And I've got that first draft done just before we got
6 weeks.
Yeah. It just seemed to write itself.
For both the
now,
book
that first
and your
draft
marriage?
is very different. Very different.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. Now, there was an awful lot of work to come when I came back, but the first draft's completely different. And I got some professional feedback early on, and they said to me, look, it's a great thriller. We really like the characters. And it's a great police procedure. What would you like it to be? And I was like, oh, and my initial thoughts was that grumpy. Why do they put us in boxes? Can it not be a thriller and a police procedural? And then I thought, well, actually, why don't we strip back the police procedure? So the police officer's still there. They are important in the story, but instead, how about making them a little more faceless? Certainly at the beginning, where it's actually from the perspective of the victim. So that was really good fun because I then flipped everything 180 degrees. So you're used to writing interrogation scenes where you've got your police officers on one side of the table, you've got your suspect or witness on the other. And the police officers are, they're silently communicating. They're asking those questions, and they're looking for the clues that the person's not telling the truth or whatever. Instead, sit on the other side of the table. They're looking at it saying, why are they asking me that? Do they not believe me? Oh, surely they don't think. No, that can't be. Completely different writing experience. Yeah. Loved it. So the police officers are still there. They're important, but you're telling it from the different perspective. And I think that was far better for it, actually. I think it made it very different. And interesting.
So
I'm just looking at
I have to ask you now because you mentioned it. Yeah. Let's pull that up. So this question is actually, you should definitely follow her. The question is, what is easier to write, a standalone or a continuous story? I mean, that's the question's on my list as well. So it's a great question.
It's difficult to say, isn't it? Because you've got the the same experience as I have, because you've written some continuous stories and you've written standalones. There are certain I mean, I've told about how much I enjoy constraints, and that's fine. I mean, my books still follow the rules. They're not rogue coppers. They're following the police procedure and stuff
Right.
where it's appropriate. But actually, what is nice is that I can make a really big mess. I mean, seriously big mess. I can really mess up these people's lives, and I don't have to worry about tidying it all up at the end so they can come back for the
Going
next
back to
book.
them. I have a similar experience. I like
So there is that freedom, isn't there? There's that freedom to
the
do what you want.
yeah. Yeah, I like the ability to have an enclosed story with characters that I'm just gonna probably spend this one time with. I like kind of
Mm.
the moving on to the next thing. But so I would say that I think standalones are a little bit easier. The continuity aspect that comes with series. I mean, you have to continuously go back to your previous books and remember, okay, what color were his eyes? What color was his daughter's hair? Or,
Yeah.
how old were they? So that you're not running over yourself. And you have to, it helps if you have a big document that has all that information in it.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I think for me, I would say standalone is a
My
little bit
document is
easier.
not nearly as detailed as it should be. It has to be said. It's a great idea, and I
I
fully endorse that approach.
I remember between my
Not necessarily I'm gonna say I've done it.
yeah, I remember between my first and second book, somebody, editor, saying he doesn't strike me as a character that dyes his hair. Did we mess that up? My bad, my mistake. So
I was fortunate the publisher gave me the same proofreader for a few of the books in a row.
oh, nice,
And
very
they
good.
actually had a big document. Yeah, and they would pick things up. And I actually asked them. I said, "Look, is there any possibility I can have this document along with also their they were doing some type some style changes to fit in with their approved writing style." So unless people might not know that publishers have in-house styles which you're expected to follow. So people are often complaining about a mashup between English and American spelling. That's almost certainly not the author.
Yeah.
What's happened is there's a style guide, and if you're not big enough to have somebody take your English manuscript and translate it into an American manuscript, which is expensive, and most of it doesn't happen to. Actually, the style guide is often a bit of a hybridization of the two, and you're stuck with it. So I always pride myself on trying to get fewer and fewer red pen marks each time I write a book.
Nice.
So they were actually kind enough to give me their style sheets and their notes, and that was quite useful actually, because where things I read,
Yeah,
right,
that's really
remember
nice.
that for next time. And then they
I actually thought they were.
say, you do know two books ago this happened.
I actually thought that I was going to turn in my American passport on my last book because I mentioned a big brand, and I didn't spell it properly according to the no.
Oh my!
It
my
was
internet
Walmart.
search is so weird. Well, that's it. You think you know it.
Yeah, you think you do.
Like we have a supermarket over here called Tesco, and everybody call it Tesco's. Tesco's. It's not. It's Tesco, singular. Sainsbury's. Is Sainsbury's begin with an S, end with an S, or is it Sainsbury apostrophe S? That's another big supermarket.
Yes.
My internet history is bizarre. So it's full of like really creepy crime writery stuff, and then random things like, what's the capitalization for Jaffa cakes, which is a very popular type of hybrid cake and biscuit in the UK. And it's like, you got to look these things up. And I still get caught out, like things like my DC in the very first DC Warren Jones book, he's listening to Heart FM radio station on the car, and it's immediately he came back and said, no, they just call it Heart now. Oh right, okay, they dropped the FM. I was like, fine. And somebody also said, by the way, given when this book is set, that wasn't a very dry summer, that was actually a very wet summer. I just thought, I don't care. And that's the thing. Sometimes you go with it, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. So when you started writing the Aftermath, or when you started kind of develop, did you start with anything in particular like, was there a spark? Was there, like, not to make a joke, was there a spark that kind of like ignited this story for you, or is it just like a
Um,
line that came to you that you said, "Oh, that's a dialogue I want to do," or where did the idea kind of come from?
do you know, it's difficult for me to answer that question because I'm not sure. I mean, what happens? You see, I have a file and I keep it on a copy on my phone where I put my ideas in, and my ideas will come from usually from watching TV, like true crime documentaries. Because my wife and I watch an unhealthy amount of true crime documentaries. The problem is that I don't write down what I've just seen. What happens is it's like a lubricant at the back of my brain. It's like almost like a catalyst for ideas. And I'll watch this crime documentary and something happens and I think, oh, that's interesting. But what if this happened instead? And then if that happens, and then, oh, here's an idea. Now the problem is you cannot draw the dots between A and Z. There's so many steps in between, and I'll finally put the idea down, and I did, and I put for the central twist of the book, etc. I put that down. Now, where the hell that came from, I will never know, and I can't give away, unfortunately, because it is a big twist. But the big central twist was basically what,
No, it is a big twist.
and then everything then was built around that twist. That was the central line, and then it was you build the story around that.
So you're an author who basically knows the ending ahead of time. You're not just kind of like figuring it out as you go ahead. Do you plot?
No, I don't do much plotting.
No.
No, when I know the ending in the sense I generally know who's done it. I know who's done it, and like I have the big twist and the reveal. I like to have a couple of what I think I like to call Agatha Christie moments. You know, when you break an alibi or something isn't that you've taken as read for most of the books. Oh, hang on, that wasn't actually what happened. A few of those, perhaps some scenes that I want to put in, as an idea of this, you know, you picture something in your head, and you think, oh, that'd be nice to put that in the book. And that's broadly it. With the Warren Jones, because it was an ongoing series, I did actually have character arcs for several books. I knew their ages, I knew the major life events, I knew what I wanted to happen to them. And then, you know, that would take place, and then the murder mystery was built around that. But when it comes to actually them writing, is I just take these ideas and I start writing. But as I write, I get more ideas, and they get added to the planning document, which is just, it's a very loose collection of mostly bullet points. And about the most organized I tend to get is I've started adding the bullet points in different colors, just not of any system, just so that I can distinguish between the different bullet points very easily. That's pretty much my thing. And when I get to the end of it, there's actually quite a lot of notes, but most of them were plotted as I wrote, and I write out a sequence as well. I write scenes as they come to me,
Out of sequence.
and then I piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle. About halfway through to 3/4 of the way through,
Oh wow.
I'll put up a loose timeline and start slotting things in, because that gives me then some structure and says, right, okay, well, you've got this bit here you haven't written yet, you've got to write that. This bit will need rewriting. You really ought to find the big clue before you talk about it here. So you move those around. And then obviously once they're in a very rough thing, I then also need to identify and smooth the edges. So it's a bit like cheating with a jigsaw puzzle. Imagine you've got a jigsaw puzzle and some of the pieces not quite fitting in the hole. So you get your jigsaw out and you reshape them slightly. That's what you have to do. You have to, so the segues are smooth. And then you put all that together and then polish it, and hopefully it works. And then you laugh like a drain when someone says, "Oh, your plotting's meticulous." It's not.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you've read anything by Jennifer Hillier.
I'm not familiar with them, no.
But she does the same thing. She does a lot of psychological thrillers. She does the same thing. She writes at Thriller Fest, actually. And she just told me, she's like, I write everything completely out of order. She's like, I have no idea. I know I want this scene. I know I want that scene. And then at the end, she's like, I have this mess that I have to then kind of fit back into each other. And I just had a little bit of a panic. So you're the second person I've heard
It is a bit nerve-wracking. It can be a bit
that did
squeaky
that.
bum because you think, you know,
Yeah.
will it
Because how do you know
will it
how
work
far
this
you are?
time?
You know,
Oh,
do you
just
just
look at
go
the
by
word
word count
count.
then?
Yeah, literally
Yeah.
work by
Okay.
word count. I mean, you get a feel. You get a feel because you as it builds on, you start to say to yourself, and you notice it's interesting when you look at because my orders are just randomly put into the idea file in order as they come. You'll notice that the ideas towards the bottom are getting more specific, and it will be along the lines of
Mm,
you need to write a scene
right.
where this happens. And what I used to do occasionally in Word, but now I do far more because I use the Scrivener writing package, is I'll actually start a fresh
Mhm.
document with some you need to write this document at some point.
Okay.
And the advantage of it, it's in some respects, it can be very efficient because actually it means that you're less likely to suffer from writer's block. Because if you get up one morning and a scene is not behaving itself, just knock it one, just go and do something else.
Yeah.
And you can do that for about the first half of the book. There's always something that you can write. So actually, you can get the words down on page because words on paper is words on paper. And often books,
Right.
there are words
And
that
that's a
just need to be down on the paper. Get them done while
that's
you're
a
feeling
great
productive.
writers. Yeah.
Mhm.
I have done that on occasion where I come to a scene. It's the scene I was. Sometimes you hit a scene, you're just like, I'm just not feeling
Right.
it, you know.
No,
But then skipping to
and
something that's a little bit more exciting, a
it's
little bit
hard
more
work.
emotional.
Yeah.
But
And
I have to
scenes can
ask
be
you now,
boring
since you
to
brought it up
write.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. They can be boring to write, and then you think they're boring, and then somebody
Yeah.
reads it and thinks it's the most exciting
And exciting to read.
because you know what's gonna happen, and they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But I have to
I
ask, because you
spoke
brought
about
up
this to Ben
earlier,
Bruce,
you
I
said
think.
you
Sorry. For those who are watching,
oh,
we
no
have a little bit of time lag, which is why we keep on speaking over each
yeah,
other.
we
So
do.
apologies if it's a little bit choppy.
But
Yeah,
you
I
said
was just
you
gonna say, I was on that note.
wrote
I did a podcast with Ben Bruce a few weeks ago, and we talked about how scenes can be very boring to write, even though they're fast-paced and action-heavy, and they're the worst. And the reason is you have to put so much effort. Every word counts, every sentence counts, and you can actually dread writing them. They're great to read, they're fun to read, and they're very satisfying when you've done them. But actually, they're an actual real chore to write. There can be a real case of I've been putting this off and putting this off, and now I
yeah.
need to do it, and you write it, and it's hard work. It's really hard work, and then once it's done, it's like I enjoy that.
Do you feel bad if you have to cut a
That's good.
scene that
And
you
you,
really like,
you
or you just kind of, like, kill the
know, always
drawings?
forgive. Um, I feel bad for a bit, and then I kind of forget I even did it. I mean, what I do is I will cut if
Yeah.
it's a really good scene and a really long scene. And perhaps it's got lots of interesting elements in it. Perhaps it's got some character stuff. Perhaps it's got some plot stuff. I need to lose some plot, which happens occasionally. The book's just getting
Mhm.
too heavy, you know. Cut it out, put it in a fresh document, and put it to one side because actually you might
Yeah,
use that again. It might be unrecognizable, but it may crop up again in a different book. And
it's
I've done
true.
that a couple of times, and that
But you
even if you don't
said
use it again,
you
it's a
wrote
little less painful if it's still there.
yeah, that's true. I have that document as well where I just like, that's a great paragraph. I'm just gonna put that in
It's like
there and
putting
maybe
something in the
one
attic
day
and you need it one day, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said you wrote the Aftermath in 6 weeks. How did you do that? Do you have, like, a daily word count that you force yourself to hit, or do you
Well,
what do you
every
do?
book's different.
I mean,
I'm
that's a
not
goal,
that
6 weeks.
organized. Yeah, I'm not that organized. And the reason being is that I've got a kind of mixed sort of life. I was a full-time school teacher, and now I tutor online. Those who are not as yet published authors don't often don't realize that actually you book simultaneously. You've got the one that's come out, you've got the one that's due out, and you're planning the next one, and you've got edits and stuff. So I tend to snatch the writing time when I can. But as it happened for the Aftermath, because I've finished my latest Warren Jones, Web of Lies, well before the deadline. I mean, well before, nearly a year before. and I suddenly had this dead space where I wasn't doing
That's
anything.
incredible.
Yeah, and it was unexpected. I wasn't expecting to do it that quick. It just seemed to write itself, and these things happen. I was like, right, okay. My publisher doesn't know I finished it, because I knew that if I told my publisher I finished it, they just rush it out sooner. I thought, well, no, they gave me this deadline, and we've got to, we push at the same time, so I'll hold back and I'll give it to them when I want it. And that gave me this space to obviously plan the wedding and stuff, which was quite important. It took us 4 attempts because of COVID. It gave me this time where I wasn't doing other stuff, because Time to Kill, the previous book, I pretty much dealt with the edits on that and stuff, and I was just waiting for that to be published. So yeah, that with that empty space, with no pressure, then it was a case of, I just sit and write. And I did. I just sat down and wrote, and so I got it very quick. So yeah, I mean, there were days when I wrote 3,000 or 4,000 words, which is good for me. I'm not one of these 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 words a day people. I've done it once. I think I hit 6,000. I was very proud of that. But normally it's 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. But if you do that for 5 or 6 weeks, then you've got 100,000 words. And so, and at the time I used to write sometimes late in the evening as well. I don't tend to do that so much these days. I think I might get back into that habit, actually, because sometimes, when it's quiet, you turn off everything's quiet, and you can knock out 1,000 or 2 words just before you go to bed. I haven't done that for a while. I might restart doing that. I'd have to resurrect a very old laptop to do that, so that I can sit comfortably downstairs. Because you've done.
I kind of like that idea of I don't normally do, but I recently tried it. I tried to see how much I could write in one day, but still have energy left over to then repeat the process the next day.
There's no point if you want to out for a week, is there?
Because I remember one time somebody was like, "Oh, do this challenge where you write 10,000 words a day," and I tried that. I got very close. I was like 8,500, but then I couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. My brain was just not there.
Yeah.
So I recently, a few weeks ago, tried to write until you feel like you will still have enough energy to do the same amount of words the next day.
Yeah.
And I ended up being around 6,000 words. I think if I were to do it again, which I'm going to try once I get back into the drafting of this new novel, I think I'm going to try to make 4,000 to 5,000 my new daily routine. In the past, I've usually tried to hit between 2,000 2,500, which has worked well for me. But I have a lot of time on my hands. I think I could probably do 4 or 5 comfortably. And once you get into that rhythm of doing it, I think you just you get used to it, and then it becomes a little bit easier over time. So we'll see.
Do you edit what you wrote the day
no
before
more 10,000 days.
You start writing?
If I wake up the next morning and I think to myself, I done this in the story yesterday, and instead of that, then maybe I'll go through and fix it, or maybe I'll just add a comment. I'm really fond of just running comments on the side of the document. So that I can
comment
go back.
Function is brilliant. Yeah. And Scrivener's got one as well.
Yeah. It's really a lifesaver.
No, I do edit the day from the day before. Not drastically, but I find if I go through the day or a couple of days work beforehand, it often gets me warmed up, particularly if I'm going to be doing a continuation of that same scene. Well, you see, that of course can knock out an hour or so of your writing day, which means that you write fewer words. But then I like to think that when I inevitably have to come back and re-edit anyway, I've done a lot of the work. So swings and roundabouts, you run Peter to pay Paul. It slows down the rate at which I put words on paper, but perhaps speeds up the editing. So yeah, it's very difficult to do that.
I think for me, because I try to write continuously, and I try to plot ahead, because if I don't plot ahead far enough, then I get sidetracked. So I try to plot ahead far enough, so I should already know what I had written the day before, and I just go to my little Excel sheet, and it says,
Mm.
okay, the next scene is simply doing this. So I always try to end my writing day at the end of a chapter of words, because I write so many words a day, and then that's when I end
Yeah,
the
and
chapter.
I tell you what, Michael Connolly is phenomenally consistent. See,
Is he?
I started doing this thing as a kid. It's really OCD, and I don't know why I do it. Whereby I get to the end of a chapter, I look at the page number, and I divide it by the number of chapters to see what the average pages are per chapter. Oh, I don't know why I do that. It's just
Yeah.
some weird, freaky thing I've done since I was a kid. But he comes out consistent. I mean, like to within a decimal point, and it's like, how? How are you so? I mean, does he write?
Yeah.
Does he write a chapter at a time, and he has a word count for chapter? Because you could do. I mean, I know certainly Scrivener offers that. You can have a word count per
Yeah.
chapter if you want. I don't. I see. I don't put chapter and section breaks in till after. I have all my scenes,
Okay.
and so I'll have a sub document for
Wow.
each scene. So I might have 100 sub
Oh.
documents, and then when I finally do my red penning, where I've printed it, I print it as it is, and then I get the red pen out and I go through and do the first sort of editing. One of the things I do is I decide, is that going to be a section break, which in my books tends to be 3 asterisks, or is it a new chapter? And then I may then try and do a little bit evening up, so that there's, broadly speaking, so many thousand words per chapter. And if the chapter's too long, I might decide to convert an appropriate section break into a chapter break, just to aim for a little bit of consistency.
Mhm.
But it's not something that I overly, aim for. But
Right.
putting in a chapter and section breaks at the end, that's been a real game changer, actually. For some reason, that just seems to make things a lot
Wow.
more efficient when you're writing. Because you
Yeah, I think
instinctively want,
when I was
because
writing
you
my
start write out a sequence and piece it all together.
Mhm.
You find that, when you
Yeah, I
do
think
the break at the end, is that a cliffhanger for a chapter,
Oh,
or
yeah.
is that actually just a natural segue, and then you've got another, you just start another section, you just switch to another person or whatever. And I quite like doing that.
Mhm. I think I got
Seems to
into the
work for me.
habit of, with my first 2 books, I kind of employed the NaNoWriMo method when it came to writing every day, just to get myself in the pattern, and
Mhm.
because I wanted to end a chapter every day, so I felt accomplished. That's how all of my chapters
Yeah,
ended up feeling like they were right around 1,600 words, because that was, like, the NaNoWriMo method.
that's what you wrote that day.
Everybody, you had to write
Yeah.
1,600 words a day in order to hit the so that's what I wrote. So they're,
Mm,
like, sort of, with the exception of 1 or 2 chapters here or there, I mean, they're very close. I
yeah.
think Sweet Little Lies was the first time I kinda did a departure from that, because I think I had some chapters that were quite short. Um, but really
Yeah,
that was
you
kind
had
of
to,
like
because you had
for
multiple
pacing.
characters. Yeah.
Yeah,
But of
yeah.
course, I just remembered, of course, Michael Connolly is a journalist. So he
Oh,
will have
yeah.
been used to turning out copy at a specific length, and will probably instinctively write to that length, and that's probably why, actually, now I come to think of it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
the writing skills
with
you
the
pick up
Aftermath,
early.
kinda
Yeah,
stick with
sorry.
you. No, I was just gonna say, like, it sounds like you had such an easy time kind of writing that Aftermath. Was there anything about it that was hard for
Um,
you?
Looking back on it, it was relatively easy, in the sense that there were no major stumbling blocks. There were the usual bits where you think, "Oh, I've written myself into a bit of a corner here." But I quite like that. I write myself into a corner, and then I find it makes me really creative to write myself back out of the corner. I mean, I'm not, it's not very often I'll say, "Do you know what? I've completely screwed this one, so I'm just gonna cut all of that and do it again." I tend to grit my teeth and try and get back out the corner, and I find that often makes for a more interesting read. It forces you to be more ingenious. So in that, it actually did write itself reasonably well. I was quite daunted when we decided that it was not going to be police procedure; it's going to be more thriller.
Mhm.
Because I thought, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to." Because I've never rewritten a book. I've edited books, but touch wood, I've never had to rewrite a book before. Some of my earliest ones, which were written before I got a contract, before I got an editor and a professional. Yes, we did a lot of work on them, but at no point had anyone ever said, right, well, that's a great idea, but you need to start again with that idea and see what happens. And I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. But actually, it turned out I didn't. I went through with the red pen again. I printed it out. I do still work on paper. And I printed it out. I basically identified chapters that needed editing. So I needed to, say, rewrite them from someone else's perspective. Chapters that actually could be cut because the police procedure I had sections obviously with the police officers discussing and doing the legwork to get the evidence that they wanted. Well, actually, what happened, of course, when I flipped everything round, so it was no longer police procedure, was all they did was they just presented that evidence in interview. They didn't see them getting the evidence. So actually, that was just maybe bracket a bit and say, oh, you need to put that line somewhere else just to make sure that to lose the reader, you've got to tell them that this happened, but the rest of that page can go. And actually, the editing was not nearly as big a job as I thought it would be. I had been worried about that, and then afterwards, it was just the usual editing. Yes, you can build it up in your head, can't you? You can think, oh my God, you look at the edits. Yeah, I have a rule. When I get feedback, I have 24 hours to sulk. That's all I'm allowed. Okay, 24 hours to sulk,
I like that.
and then it's roll your sleeves up and get on with it. And I've actually found those 24 hours are getting shorter and shorter because quite often I go, oh, for God's sake, I like them. And then it's like, why can't I do that? And then I just decide, and then it's like, but if I get rid of that, then I can do this instead. And actually, I'm quite positive when it comes to edits and feedback. Even though, what you hand over, your first draft, you still hand over, when you've edited it, you hand over your draft to your publisher and you wait there with bated breath. You do still believe in that book and you still think, I've done a good job here. And, half of you says they're going to hate it. The other half says, and they're going to say to you, oh, you knocked out the park this time. Of course, it's never either. It's always in the middle, as it should be.
I'm always surprised. Yeah, I'm always surprised when I don't know why, but I'm always surprised when I get like positive feedback and somebody says I loved it or the twist surprised me, especially if but yeah, it's always nice to hear something good.
We are very critical. We're our own worst critics.
We are. Yeah, we really are. We have another question here. This is a good one. Writing a new novel in a genre you aren't as comfortable in.
I'm going to let you answer this one first because your latest, or the one coming up, The Man in Room 7. So that is really different to the ones you've written before. And I mean, you've got things like you've got themes of paranormal running through it and stuff. So that's got to be very different in terms of what you are researching. So I'll let you run with that first of all, because I think your answers will be interesting.
It's funny. I kind of fell into thriller writing by accident. It had never been my intention to write thrillers. So when I started writing thrillers, it was kind of a surprise to me. I always thought I was going to kind of go more into a horror direction where you can slip the paranormal stuff in a little bit more easily. And with The Man in Room 7, I actually had the entire novel plotted out. I wrote, it was 30,000 words too short, which was insane because I'm a notorious overwriter. Like my books always have to have 20,000 words cut.
Only 20.
So I was,
165 is my record.
Well, that's a lot.
Yeah, that was down to 125. So I was 40.
Wow. It's funny with my first book, it was 20, and then they had me add another 20. So it kind of came out even. But I wrote the entire book, and I realized I was missing like a third of the story. And so I kind of went back and looked at it, and I was like, well, what would make this story more interesting to me? Because what I had written, I wasn't entirely happy with. I'd always wanted to have some kind of supernatural paranormal element in a story. I wanted to kind of have that, something a little bit more, this Sarah Pinborough, Tudor vibes going that direction.
Not a bad role model.
And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try this. No, I thought I'll just try this. I'm gonna throw this element in I started working on but didn't finish. So I just took that element from that other story, put it in this one, and then crossed my fingers and hoped that my editor wasn't like, "What is this? We didn't we didn't sign on to this." But it worked out, and I think that
Yeah.
I think the paranormal element adds makes you kind of wonder what is real here. Like, who do I believe? Who do I trust? Are these people able to do what they say that they can do? And I think it just adds a different level. I guess we'll see.
Well, the funny thing is, it really works, because I was amazed when you because I had heard somewhere else that you'd added this extra. I think it might be in the acknowledgements at the end. It doesn't feel like it, because the way you describe it, it sounds like, oh, I thought I had to pad it out with 30,000 words. No, it's not padding. I mean, it's hard to believe that wasn't there from the beginning, because the whole book is so smoothly written. Everything is so heavily integrated that the idea that you would have it without those additional 20 or 30,000 words, what it was you added, seems inconceivable, which is brilliant. I don't know how much work that was and how much angst that involved, but it whatever it was worth it.
I mean, there was some angst. Yeah, there was some angst. Actually, the work wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I guess I didn't answer exactly the question. The question was about how much research you did. I did have my sister believes 100% in the paranormal, in psych. So whenever she has a problem, she's a little bit like my protagonist in the sense that she's calling up the psychic and asking for advice. Fair here in the Netherlands, and had a reading done, and I don't know, something about that just kind of stuck with me, and I thought, this would be a fantastic character, but it would also be a fantastic thing for a character to, base all of their life decisions on as well. And so I guess when I had to figure out something to put in, I just thought, that would be a good thing to kind of slip into the story. And I'm glad it worked, because it was a gamble.
It did work. It worked really well. I mean, yeah, absolutely, but it's a gamble that paid off. And for me, I mean, how much extra research did I need? It's interesting, because it was at its essence, because don't forget, I did write it essentially as a police procedural thriller, if you like. The research was done in the same way as it would have been for a Warren Jones, so I didn't feel necessarily, in terms of research, that I was writing anything different. The difference came from telling it from different viewpoints, cutting out the research, cutting out the procedure, which is, I wouldn't say it's a crutch, because that sounds negative, but that's actually, it's my fallback position, if you like, is the procedure, and also the interviews. I mean, I feel very comfortable doing police interviewing, and I fully intend to write more police procedural books. But I didn't actually need to do much more in terms of research for the genre, because like I said, it wasn't necessarily originally. I didn't feel I was doing that. But I mean, I read a lot of domestic thrillers. I just want to point this out.
Yeah. Do you think you would ever write a completely different genre?
Probably. No, I mostly write thriller and stuff. I did start, when I was first starting, just as a pleasure writer, write lots of science fiction. It was mostly speculative fiction, going right back to when I was a kid. And funnily enough, what got me going on this trajectory was writer's block. When I was writing a book about man's first journey to Mars, which, to be honest, has pretty much been overtaken by real life events and hopefully future events. But one subplot in there did involve a murder. Someone was murdered. They were trying to, basically, very prestigious to get on this flight. So, somebody was killed. And I found I kept on going back to that bit. I was stuck on the rest of it. I'd written a lot. I'd written 70,000 words. I'd written a lot, but I was stuck. Wow. It wasn't going anywhere. And but this murder, I kept on going back and tweaking it and twisting it, and I thought, someone's telling me something here. So I quite like science fiction. Now, obviously, if Pocketbooks, who currently
Yeah.
own the rights to write Star Trek novels, were to come looking, then yes, absolutely, because I believe we have something in common in that sense.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I have a document on my computer that says, so I'm waiting for the call.
Yeah.
I just have I have a list that I can go through. If you could write any Star Trek universe, which one would you write? Like which Deep Space Nine, Voyager,
Oh, next generation era, because that's what I grew up
Next
on. I mean,
Generation?
that's the thing.
Yeah.
It aired in BBC Two about 1990, and I was a young teenager, and or maybe even younger, and I started watching it, and that's the one, that everything branched off from for me. But I do love the characters from the other series. I mean, I really like. I don't know if you've read these, William Shatner's books that he's written
His
with.
tech books or the
Well, not
Star
his
Trek
Tech War
books?
ones. I have read his Tech War ones,
Yeah.
but no, his
Okay.
the Shatnerverse ones.
Yes. I do have a few. I have a whole
Yeah. Well, I've got the
shelf. It's
whole.
just Trek books.
Well, I reread them periodically. I love them,
I do
and
too.
they are primarily, once you get past the first one or two, set in the what was then the modern Trek era, because they were
Yeah.
written around about the millennium. So we've got Voyager. We've got it goes basically up to Voyager. And so you've got Kirk is obviously the key protagonist in these, but it's post his imagining of how you could have had a film straight after Generations, where Kirk's resurrected by the Borg,
Right.
and which I thought would have been wonderful if they'd ever done that. But he's been
Would
brought
have been
forward
brilliant.
obviously 80 years, so he's in with all the characters, but McCoy's still there, 145, and as irascible as ever, and Spock, of course, is doing
Oh,
his thing on Romulus. And Scotty's there because, of
yes.
course, he came back in season 6 of Next Generation.
That's right.
And so the characters are all there, and he sprinkled it with Deep Space Nine characters, and he sprinkled it with some of the Voyager characters. And I keep on saying he. Judith Guthrie Stevens have
Yeah,
working with Bill Shatner. It would be fantastic, and I would love to write that. But
I would love as
interestingly,
well.
the platypus
Honestly,
just said, I would pay
there are
insane amounts of money for you to write a DS9 novel. Well, here's the thing. If we were to write a crime novel, DS9 might be a better setting
I
potentially than
think
one of the Starships.
DS9 is perfect for a thriller or perfect for a crime novel. It's already got it set up. You have the constable, you have Odo, you have, I think Quark would probably have to be involved in the investigations somehow.
Oh, absolutely.
I think
Garrick.
there's a lot there. Actually, a lot of Garrick, of course.
Garrick could be the red herring, wouldn't he?
Prime suspect number 1 for the first half of the book. No,
Yeah.
I think Deep Space Nine really lends itself to thrillers and to crime, and I think
around the back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so many of those episodes actually feel like thriller setups to me. Actually, I think there are just so many where they feel like it could have been a setup for a thriller, and then they just went in their Star Trek direction instead.
I have to say, one thing I wouldn't do, I wouldn't cheat. I wouldn't do it all on the holodeck. I was never really a fan of holodeck episodes. Funnily enough, they were never my thing. And I know obviously they had the Moriarty and stuff. And ideally, you could set up any environment you want, so you could set up. No, I would if I did it. I'd like to do
it was
it
a murder on a
Enterprise,
holodeck.
Deep Space Nine would be a very strong backdrop.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be a great. Yeah, I mean that would be a nice MacGuffin, wouldn't it? But I wouldn't want to actually have them. Doing it inside the holodeck. I thought that could get a bit silly sometimes. I mean, trying to find a murder aboard the Enterprise, trying to find a murder aboard Voyager 70,000 light years from home. That'd be interesting.
That would be a good one. They had an episode that was very similar to that, where one of the characters on Voyager ended up being kind of a secret psychopathic murderer that ended up turning sides.
Or am I thinking of a different character?
Oh no, you think I can't remember the name of his. Maybe somebody in the chat remembers his name. He was the fellow who was hiding in the walls, and then when the when Voyager was taken and they dropped them all off on that planet and flew away, he was still hiding in the walls, and so he worked with the doctor to
Oh,
get the
right,
ship
okay.
back.
I don't remember that. Right.
I don't know.
Mind
It
you,
was
a
I
lot
can't
of the
remember the guy's
Voyager
name.
ones were when I was at university, and it was a little tricky for me sometimes to get access
Ah,
to a TV. So I kind of watched them once and then never saw them again.
yeah.
The Star Trek Next Generation, I've watched probably most of the episodes more than once, so I'm a bit more familiar. But yeah, so I love the novels. I don't read as many as I'd like to. I own loads. But I do treat myself at Christmas. Often I'll download a couple on my Kindle and see how they
Have you
go.
read the Garrick
Lower
one?
Decks episode, yes.
Yeah. Have you read the one with by Andrew
Stitch in
J.
Time,
Robinson, Stitch in Time?
yes.
Brilliant. It is
Yep,
kind
that
of a
is in the
thriller.
box of books that mysteriously disappeared when we moved house. Yeah, I had.
No.
I've
I hope
got.
you
I
find it.
swear to God, there was another box somewhere full of books, and they were pretty much all Star Trek books. And
Oh,
they seem to have gone. I had a couple of boxes when I moved in. I've opened them. I'm thinking, and every so often I'll see a book, and I'm thinking, I'm sure I had a copy of that.
yeah.
Hey,
Which
but
that one's a
I
good one
went
because that
back
one is
to
technically
the
a spy
secondhand
thriller.
bookstore. Yeah, it was. Yeah, and apparently he had a lot of input into it as well, which isn't always the case.
Mhm.
I went back to the bookstore. It was a secondhand bookstore in Bath, in the UK, where I went to university. And we had a bit of a reunion, some friends of mine. And I went back in. It's still there, 20 odd years on. And they had some Star Trek novels, all of which I had, so there was no point in buying any. And I had all the memories, wow, I was used to buy these when I was a student, getting from here if they weren't in the library. Because the library used to stock quite a lot, actually. They don't tend to do that so much now, but they did back then.
Mhm.
And then my wife gave out a yelp, and she found one of my books, A Price to Pay.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, so this
What a
place
dream.
where I used to come and feed my reading addiction,
Wow.
this has now got copies of my own book. I mean, wow, how
That's
cool is that?
fantastic. I would definitely freak out. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left before I think the streaming is gonna
We
cut us
do.
out. So before we go, tell everybody how they can find you. Where are you on social media? Do you have a website?
Yep.
All of that stuff.
So paulgitsham.com, one word, spelt as my surname is there. There's a couple of blogs on there. There's a recommended reads blog, which is literally recommended reads. I don't do star ratings or anything. It's just stuff I like. I need to put a few more in there. That's infrequent. I also have a regular Tuesday tip blog, and that is writing tips. And that can involve guest authors.
Which is fantastic,
I've
by the
never
way.
had you as a guest author. We'll think about that. But also
All right.
just general tips. That's not far off 200 tips now. So there's quite a lot there.
Wow.
Social media, at Paul Gitsham on Instagram, at DCI Jones Writer on Twitter X, whatever you call it these days. And
Yep.
there's a DCI Jones page on Facebook. Yeah.
And again, your new book,
the
The
Aftermath is
Aftermath,
out now.
it is out now.
Yeah, ebook
On
and paperback
ebook.
available. Yep. So all the
Brilliant.
usual sellers. I've put it onto a lot of platforms, so it should be fully available. And of course,
And
let's
it will
not
be
forget,
in
Karin
the
has one out
I
next
do. I
month.
have this one out in a week and a half. The
Week and a
Mandarin
half.
7.
Of course, yes, it is
Yeah.
nearly November, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
It's coming
Well
up.
worth a read, guys. Well worth a read.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
I'm
you for
so glad
having
we
me.
finally got
Thank you.
We'll
Brilliant.
have to do this again sometime.
We will definitely have to do this again sometime. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
And to everybody who watched the live stream, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your questions.
Yeah,
Again,
thank you
check
very much
out
for your
Paul
comments.
Gitsham on his
Lots of love
socials.
for Jadzia Dax, I see.
Yes, a lot of love for Jadzia. Justice for Jadzia. I love that. Yes, we do love Jadzia. All right. Well, thank you again,
Thank you
and
for having
have a
me.
nice evening.
You too.